Yeah, hi there. These comments are for MN, and I am Michael, the founder, owner, and the materials writer for all of your lessons at the 7-step system to pass a TOEFL IBT. And you sent me an email, and you're one of my students in my online TOEFL course. You say, I have a problem. I cannot understand the main ideas in a lecture or in the reading. Can you please guide me more with this problem? Alright, sometimes we can't see the forest through the trees, so to speak. Sometimes we focus on the individual aspects of a reading passage or a lecture, but we're still not getting the big point. Right? So what I want to do right now, first of all, I want to give you a suggestion of how you can organize your notes for the integrated speaking and integrated writing tasks. Okay, so especially when you hear when you're reading a passage and listening to a lecture, so with TOEFL integrated speaking, we're talking about integrated task number 3 and also integrated speaking task number 4. Of course, during the integrated writing, you're reading a passage and listening to a lecture. So with integrated writing, the first step is, you'll know usually with reading passages, right in the beginning, usually the first paragraph of a reading passage, you will have what we call in writing a thesis. The thesis is when the writer states the main point or purpose of the passage. So you want to look for, in the first paragraph, maybe the first line, maybe the last line of that paragraph, you want to write down what you think the topic is. So you'll state the topic of the reading passage right here. And my recommendation when you're stating the topic, don't write down the complete sentence in the reading passage, but let's just write down some key words. Right? Now again, in the listening passage, you want to do the same thing. You want to write down what you think the topic of the listening passage is. Now here's a key. If you know what the topic of the reading is, then you can assume that the topic in the listening is connected to that information. So it's very important that first you get complete notes from the reading passages. If you can do that, it makes it easier for you to concentrate on the points in the listening. Okay, the next thing, especially for integrated writing, you want to try to write down what you think are some of the main points. So let's say we have 3. So write down the first topic here. You want to write down the second topic here. And then you want to write down what the third topic is here. Now here, this is a key. If you're fairly complete with each of these ideas, then it'll be easier over here. Now here's a key. If you know what the topic of the reading passage is, then you want to look at the different paragraphs. If there's several different paragraphs in there, then you can focus on what the key point is of each of those body paragraphs. And you write those things down here. Remember that for academic reading, usually the main idea or the general idea stated typically in the beginning of the paragraph, and then you have the more specific details after that. Now, when you get to the lecture, if you have the topics from the reading passage already listed in your notes, kind of like I'm showing you here, then it'll make it increasingly easier for you to listen for the topics in the listening passage. So that's what you want to do there. You want to try to write down what those topics are there. So if you take a look at ets.org, it's also important as you get used to getting the main points of the reading and the listening passages, you want to make sure you understand what it is you're trying to do here. So the reading section is 60 to 80 minutes. You'll have 36 to 56 questions. You'll read 3 or 4 passages from academic text. This is key. We'll talk about this more in a minute. In the listening, you'll have, again, 60 to 90 minutes, 34 to 51 questions. You'll be listening to lectures. You can also call these academic lectures, classroom discussions and conversations, and then you will answer some questions. So again, you'll have more passages here. Speaking, you will be also reading and listening. In that case, like I said before, and also in the writing, you will be responding to some reading and listening tasks. Right? So the key is there will be certain types of organizational patterns that you want to focus on. Okay, so let me explain a little bit more about reading and getting the main points. And this also is coming from ets.org, the ones who actually designed the TOEFL test. So it says, think carefully about how ideas are connected within a text. The connection between sentences and the links between paragraphs are critical to complete comprehension. So if you have, for example, we talked a minute ago about how you have 4 or 5 reading passages, right? Each reading passage during the reading section of the TOEFL has 7 or 8 paragraphs. So you have to look at each paragraph and see how it connects to other paragraphs within the passage. So in order for you to do this, it's a good idea, as it's saying here, to practice outlining. It says, begin by determining the main idea or concept presented in each paragraph. Remember that main ideas are typically stated near the beginning of the paragraph. It says, remember to distinguish between the main points and the details that exemplify them. So usually when someone's introducing a main idea, they might use a transition word like first of all. They might say second of all, something like that. Now once they get to a detail, they may say for instance or for example or to illustrate. So there's different kinds of transition words that signal either main points or they signal what's called support points. Now for you, if you go to my website, I know you're one of my students, so you want to pay attention to speaking lesson number 7. And in part of that lesson, it gives you some instruction about transition words, different kinds of transition words. You want to make sure that you're familiar with the different kinds of transition words and introduce main points, and also they introduce details. It says, group paragraphs that address the same concept. Think about how the key idea in one paragraph relates to the main point of the next paragraph. If there are several paragraphs that focus on the same idea or concept, synthesize the key points into one main idea. Write one sentence or phrase summarizing the paragraphs that discuss the same idea. Add important details that support each major idea or concept. So that's also good. That helps you keep track of the main and the most important supporting points. Now this is also very important. It says here for reading, learn to recognize different organizational styles in order to understand the way an article is structured. It says look for common patterns of organization that you find in articles. Pay attention to connecting words in order to understand the pattern of organization. So, what kinds of organization patterns are common? Right? So let me see if I can give you some ideas here. So one, just off the top of my head, I would say here, cause-effect is a really popular organizational pattern. So if the writer is explaining a cause of something, then for example, the effects of that, you want to try to follow effect 1, 2, 3, and 4. Another one will be compare and contrast. Is a common organizational pattern, I think, in academic reading. So, what is actually being compared? What's being contrasted? If you can keep track of that, that's also good. Another one is I'm going to just call it a chronological type organization. Or if we want to make it a noun here, a chronology. A chronology typically, it'll explain typically the steps in which something happened or someone's life happened. They'll usually talk about things from the most recent, I think, to the oldest, or the oldest to the most recent. But if the person, or if the reading passage is discussing something chronologically, you want to keep track of the different events that are happening and in what order they happen. So again, you're trying to organize your notes accordingly. So if it is a chronology of something, usually it'll be a person, or it'll be some type of historical event, and it'll explain the different the timeline regarding how something happened. So that's also important. There's other things. Maybe you're looking at an argument. The writer is making an argument about something and giving specific reasons as to why he or she believes a certain way. So you want to follow that. So whether the reading passage follows cause-effect, compare and contrast, chronology, argument, and so on, you want to try to follow that organization, and that will help you with your note-taking process. The TOEFL ETS says, let's take a look at some things. It says, write a summary of a text, making sure that it incorporates the organizational pattern of the original. So it says, if the text is a comparison, be sure that your summary reflects and uses appropriate transition words and phrases for comparison. So comparison, when we're showing how things are similar, for example, we might use a word like likewise, or similarly, or in the same manner. If we're showing how things are different, then you can expect the reading passage to use things like on the other hand, however, unlike, despite, although, but, and so on. So the ETS is saying that you definitely want to pay attention to those kinds of words. And if you are summarizing a text, you want to use the words that reflect the organizational patterns that we're discussing here. For example, cause-effect, you'll notice words like because, maybe therefore, maybe hence, as a result, consequently, those kinds of words. Chronology is things like first, second, third, and so on, right? It says here, if the text argues 2 points of view, be sure both points of view are reflected in your summary and that appropriate transition words are used. So if you can practice summarizing these reading passages reflecting different organizational patterns, then you will definitely be able to keep track of those notes as you're doing the TOEFL exam. You see what I'm saying? So at my website, you can utilize these strategies as you go through the reading and the listening sections of my course. As you read the passages, you practice taking notes on the main and the most important supporting points reflecting the organization of that passage. And the same thing you can do for the listening section. Okay, so to add to what I'm saying already about reading, and the main thing is you're trying to get used to getting the main ideas of reading and listening passages. So now, again, I went to ets.org, and I'm going to expand on some of the suggestions that they say, which will help you to keep track of your note-taking when it comes to lectures. So it says, become familiar with the organization or structure of lectures. So pay attention to the structure. So typically, here's what you want to know, is a lecture typically has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Right? That would be a lecture or presentation on an academic topic. Now, if it's a story or a narrative, then you want to pay attention to the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story. So I think in the introduction, that's when you write down what the main point is, or the key idea. You'll hear that near the beginning of the lecture, so that's important. Once you hear the introduction, then you start to get some of the support points for that introduction or for that beginning. You see what I'm saying? Now also, another tip, learn to recognize different types of organization. So for TOEFL, there's different kinds of lectures that you will listen to. They're kind of predictable. One's called theory and evidence. So in this type of lecture, the speaker discusses a theory regarding something, and then there's specific evidence to explain why the person believes this way. So first of all, the main thing is, what is the theory that the person is speaking about, and then what evidence does the person explain to validate that theory? Now, another one, like reading, you have what's called cause-effect. You have steps in a process, and then you have a comparison of two things. These are popular types of organizations in TOEFL type lectures. So you want to get used to that and then take notes based on some of those things. So the next one says, think carefully about the purpose of the lecture. So what is the professor trying to accomplish in the lecture? So write down only the information that you hear. Be careful that you're not interpreting information based on your personal understanding or knowledge of the topic. So you're just focusing on the facts. It says, answer questions based on what was actually discussed in the talk. And I think here's a pretty good tip for you here. It says, develop a note-taking strategy to help you organize information into a hierarchy of main points and supporting details. And make sure that your notes follow the organization of the lecture. So if the lecture is, for example, focusing on theory and evidence, then your notes need to follow that organization, or cause-effect, or steps in a process, or a comparison of two things. So, and you can learn more about these. I talk about these in more detail in my online TOEFL course when you go to listening lesson number 1. That will give you some good tips on how you can develop a note-taking system that can help you follow the main and the most important supporting points of the lecture and reflecting the specific organizational pattern of the lecture you're listening to. All right? Here's a couple of other things. It says, listen to signals that will help you understand the organization of a talk, connection between ideas, and the importance of ideas. Listen for expressions of vocabulary that tell you the type of information being given. Think carefully about the type of information that these phrases show. For example, if the person says opinion, they might say something like, I think, it appears that, it is thought that. If they're talking about theory, they might say, well, in theory, they might use something like that, or inference, therefore, then. Then they say therefore, then they explain kind of an implication of something that's already mentioned, and so on. You can also focus on digressions. You can listen for signal words and phrases that help connect ideas so you can understand the relationships a little bit better. And here's different kinds of words here. Reasons, results, examples, comparisons, opposing ideas, another idea, similar idea, restatements, and conclusions. So if you follow some of these transition words, it helps you to keep track of how the different ideas are connected. My website, I already told you a minute ago, if you go to speaking lesson number 7, I have a really complete, comprehensive list of transition words that you can review so you can understand how the ideas are connected a little bit better. All right? I think that's it. So going back to what your question is, so you're saying I can't understand the main ideas of lectures or reading passages. Hopefully this video has given you some additional information to help you with that. So now your job is to take some of these ideas that are discussed in this video and then start going through the listening and the reading passages at my website and start trying to follow and get down in note form the main and the most important supporting points of these ideas. All right? Anyway, thank you very much.